Hello everyone, welcome to KSR Datavizon. So today we are going to see about what is Spring Boot, what are the features of Spring Boot, what are the advantages of going for a Spring Boot. So let us see what is Spring Boot first. So Spring Boot is a Java based Spring framework. Right? So we had different frameworks like JS, Struts, and the recent one is Spring, which is a Java based framework for used for a rapid application development for a web-based development. If you want to create a web portal or like standalone application using microservices, right, we can go for Spring Boot. We will see the comparison also, what is the difference between a Spring and Spring Boot. So Spring Boot has an extra support for auto configuration, right? So earlier in the case of Spring will be finding out a jar and then do the configuration and everything. But here in the case of Spring Boot, I mean, we can add one jar where the relevant jar will be added automatically by Spring Boot. And the application server like Tomcat, Jetty and all already will be embedded within Spring Boot. So we don't need to install server separately and then configure it. So these are the main use of going for a Spring Boot. So as I said, it is used for rapid application development, right? So it can be used for standalone application as well as web-based application also with minimal configuration. We don't need to repeat the code or we don't need to write a XML code. It uses convention over configuration design pattern. Okay, so there are two different framework: convention over configuration, configuration over convention. Right. So here, I mean, we don't need to do write too much of coding. Only just we do the configuration. Right. Everything will be taken care here. So here you can see in the bottom picture Spring Boot what it gives, right? So earlier we had a Spring framework where dependency injection, uh, IOC, AOP, everything was there, right? So that is also there. And then we are adding the server also, Tomcat, Jetty, and everything for writing your, I mean, connecting to the server. So that is also there. And then it removes our manual configuration, right? I don't need to write a bean configuration, bean instantiation, bean binding, everything we can remove it. So everything together, right, it gives Spring Boot. That is the main advantage. Okay, so what are the features of Spring Boot which makes a difference between a Spring framework and a Spring Boot or any other framework? So it creates standalone Spring application with minimal configuration. As I like said, we don't need to write manually dependency injection and everything. Okay, and it has embedded Tomcat server. Okay, and it has embedded H2 database also. Okay, and it provides production ready features like if you want to add a, actuator, like you can see the health condition of the server, so you can see how our server is running with our present application load, whether it is scalable or not, how the health check is there, right? So earlier we'll be using JMeter and everything. Instead of that, we can use this activator for checking the health check, and absolutely no requirement for XML configuration. Everything is annotation, right? So right hand side you can see what are the things, like I can create a Spring Boot application, simple or complex one, and then lazy initiation. What do you mean by lazy initiation? I mean, whenever it is required, some of the bean configuration or whatever, whenever you need at that time you can instantiate it. Okay, admin features, like lot of different features are there, how we can do an integration, how do we configure it. I mean, you want to change the database connection, you want to change the production readiness, everything you can change it. And security, so Spring itself has a module called Spring Space Security. So with that we can ensure like security feature is addressed. Logging, if I can integrate SL4J logging or commons logging or whatever. We want to do a audit trial, right? Everything we can do it with the help of logging. Caching, right? I want to store in my I mean, whatever the server data I want to store in client, I can use it with the help of caching. Kotlin support. So we have Groovy, Java, Kotlin, right? So different languages support also will be provided by Spring Boot. Validation. So I want to validate a field. So earlier, only Struts was having the validation framework. Right now, I mean, Spring also has. I mean, starting itself it was there, but it has been enhanced. So you can validate a field while I mean key in itself. Okay, and then JSON support. If you want to integrate with the REST API, we don't need to send the entire HTML. Instead of that, you just send the data through JSON or XML, right? So that way, I mean, Spring Boot will help how you can render the data in any UI framework from Spring Boot. And then testing, I mean, it is very easy for integrating the testing environment, and then we can write the test cases and then execute testing with any kind of customized framework as well as Spring framework, and then do it. So these are the main features of Spring Boot. So what are the advantages of going for a Spring Boot? So easy to understand and develop a Spring application. And we have the embedded HTTP server also, which is not there in the existing framework. When we are comparing Spring framework, we don't have that framework where we can embed the server. So we have to manually configure it. So that has been removed. And then configuration is easy. I'm not going to write multiple XML, right? Increase productivity and reduce development time. Minimal configuration. Okay, we are not going to write any XML configuration. So these are the main advantages. So what are the key components, right? So these are the four key components. Auto configuration, right? So we say like at the rate Spring Boot application, that will take care of everything. CLI, I can create a project and then run a project using CLI, command line interface. And starter POM. So POM.xml, you declare any dependency, that it will take care, it will address whatever the dependency jar file you want to take it. Spring Boot actuator, where we can do the health check of the server application and everything. So these are the key components of Spring Boot. So here you see like why Spring Boot over Spring. So pom.xml is one, right? So we are not going to find out which jar, what compatibility issue, everything has been removed. Version management, I can do versioning like CI/CD. If I want to do a versioning on a file or a folder or anything, I can do a version management. Auto configuration, right? So that we'll see down the line how at the rate Spring Boot application helps multiple configuration. Component scanning, how this auto configuration helps component scanning. Like instead of going through each and every file, if I mention a package, how I can scan it, what are the dependency are there. So that is called component scanning. Embedded server, so inbuilt features of Spring Boot where it is not there in Spring framework. Inbuilt memory, like H2 database is there in the case of Spring Boot, whereas in Spring we have to manually configure. Actuator, to monitor our health check. So here is the difference between Spring and Spring Boot framework. So here you can see like it's a popular framework. Here Spring Boot mainly came here to support our REST API development as well as with the help of JSON data I can render my UI page. So it is so simple, right? So in Spring framework, I mean, we can remove the boilerplate code. But in the case of Spring Boot, I mean, it is easy, shorten the code development. I mean, you can use annotation instead of XML. Here in Spring framework, we have dependency injection, IOC, and everything. Whereas the case of Spring Boot, we are having actuator to monitor our health, right? And then Spring is lightweight, and then we had multiple components in place. But here in the case of Spring Boot, dependency management, we can just add it by configuring it. So whatever you want to add it, you can plug in it, right? So again, here Spring framework with the help of pom.xml, you can do a dependency management. Here in the case of Spring Boot, auto configuration. One jar you add it, automatically it is going to pull other relevant jar for the particular project to run. In Spring framework, we have to do a JDBC abstraction layer, error handling and everything. Whereas the case of here, embedded server is there going to support it. Here we have multiple things in case of Spring Boot. but here we are going to use Spring Initializer, right? Starter.spring.io. In that, you are going to configure it. One jar will be having multiple jar. So these are the main differences between a Spring framework and Spring Boot framework. So these are the features. So we have seen uh, what is a Spring Boot, what are the main features, what are the key components, and what makes a difference. Hope this session is so informative for you to understand like what is a Spring Boot. We'll see more in the upcoming session. Thanks everyone for your time.